When this morning's guest took his wife on their first date, they dined at the White House. Who is he? You'll meet him coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at the Design Center at the Stone Temple in the industrial park behind Myrtle Beach Lighting. We're focused on the life of John Palmer, and we're visiting with the man himself. Good morning, John. Thank you so much for coming in this morning.
Great, thanks for having me.
You know, all week long we've been focused on, of course, juvenile diabetes research or broadcasting and other careers, and of course to think about focusing on the life of somebody, that's kind of broad there.
Well, a lot of my life started right here in Myrtle Beach as a child, so it's kind of, I haven't been here for years, but it's really a homecoming.
Is that right? You grew up in Myrtle Beach? Well,
I grew up in East Tennessee, but every year we vacationed here, always the first 2 weeks in August, and we looked forward. We would drive over the mountains, and I'm sure my mother and father would recall that often we got car sick driving through those mountains to come down, and then we'd usually leave around midnight, and in the morning we would arrive through Conway and down to Myrtle Beach. We stayed at hotels that are no longer here, the Patricia and the Ocean Forest. But we came every year, and it was just an absolute thrill and enjoyment.
And you remember vividly. I mean, you have vivid memories of your experiences here.
Oh, yeah. There was a time that we were leaving, and I guess I kind of pitched a fit, and I was screaming, and my parents wanted to know, what's the problem? And I said, wait, I want to see them when they pull the cork. The Palmers were leaving Myrtle Beach, and I thought, certainly, they drained the ocean. And I love to fish, and I wanted to, even then I liked to fish, and I wanted to see all the fish that were there that I never was able to catch.
Oh, wow.
But they always, anyway, they tell that. I don't think it's true, but my mother and dad always talked about that and said that I had done that.
But you caught a couple of fish.
Oh, yeah. I love to surf cast, and that's where I developed my love, really, of fishing. My dad and I would get up very early in the morning, which served me later from working on the Today Show and getting up at 3:30 in the morning. But I always loved to get up and fish early in the morning. Whether that helps the fishing or not, I don't know, but it feels like it
felt
does.
Like you were really doing something.
Yeah.
Getting out there early.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure being with your dad, did you have brothers and sisters growing up?
I have two sisters and no brothers.
No other boys.
I was the, as they say, the baby of the youngest of the family. But my dad and I, we fished a great deal all over the place. We did ocean fishing. We'd go out of Merle's Inlet. I remember.
Sure.
We'd sometimes out of Daytona. We'd fished in Bimini, and we fished in Montana. We'll fish anywhere.
Now, did your dad ever take your sisters out? Did they ever get rod
They
and reel?
never were really into it that much at all. He taught them tennis. He was a semi-tennis pro, and when he graduated from Princeton, he toured. I think they made, my dad told me we made $50 a match. I think tennis players get a little bit more money than professional tennis players.
A couple more dollars now.
But he did that for a couple of years. But I was very fortunate that because of his love of fishing, I developed a love of fishing, and it's something I've done all my life and love.
You shared before we started filming this morning that I believe you have 3 girls, and that's why I was wondering if you had ever passed the experiences of fishing with your father down to fishing with the dad-daughter experience.
I have with the 3 daughters. Molly, our oldest, is now 22, and she's working for the Today Show in Burbank, California.
Like father, like daughter.
Keeping it in the family. And Carter, our middle daughter, is 21, and she is the senior at Boston University. And believe it or not, our youngest, Hope, is coming to the College of Charleston.
Oh, come on.
She's going to school. And going to the same school that Molly, our oldest daughter, went to, the College of Charleston.
Your first child went to the College of Charleston as well. And you've been down there? Has Dad been down to visit? Mom and Dad
a lot. I'm on the advisory board of the council to advise the communications department. And so I am forced to go to Charleston, eat that beautiful food, stay in those beautiful places. I love that town. Who doesn't?
It is.
I mean, it's a charming town. And a wonderful place to go to school, and my daughter's thrilled to be be going there.
And really your middle child, she you couldn't convince her to head down
to
the
Palmetto State? She wanted to go north to BU, so she's up in Boston now.
Is that right?
And how she can tolerate that cold weather, I don't know. I talked to her last winter, and And I said, Carter, I saw it was like 6 below zero in Boston last night. And she said, Dad, you don't know the half of it. But she seemed to have a warm coat and adapted to the weather.
That's great. So do you all live on the West Coast now, or are you permanently on?
Yeah, well, we live in Washington,
okay.
And I've lived there for now about 14 years. Before, lived in New York, of course, when I was doing the Today program.
Right.
Started out at WSB in Atlanta.
Oh, yeah, sure.
When I first started out in broadcasting. So I've traveled a bit, and I traveled overseas. I think I've lived in 7 or 8 different cities.
No.
Excuse me, which you have to do, of course, as you travel around covering different stories, getting more experience as a reporter. I was based in Paris, based in Beirut, in Cairo, and also in this country in Chicago and New York and in Washington. So there's a bit of moving around, and but each place has been fun and has great memory.
Sure. Do any of those cities stand out in your vivid memory, John, that really seemed like more stories came out while you were in those towns during certain periods?
I would have to say Chicago,
really?
in this country, because it's such an intersection of America.
Right.
Whatever problems Americans have, you're going to find them in Chicago, or good things as well. Mm-hmm. Museums, opera, symphony. It's also a transportation hub. If there are union problems, airline problems, it's an airline hub. So it's a weather hub. You know, the weather in Chicago and so forth.
You've said that before.
Yeah, and there's so many different aspects. I just felt it was a good news town where you could get a peg on anything. You could pick up and call someone locally and talk to them about most any issue that's a national issue, because they were either involved in transportation, race relations, education, all those things.
It's such a big city and the 3rd largest TV market in the country. But now, when you were in Chicago, was that was working on the national level, though? I mean, that was...
No, I actually, well, the first time I went to Chicago was... I remember I was there the second week. It was the 63. That was the Kennedy assassination.
Oh boy!
And what a trauma that was. And I was anyway sent to Klein's Sporting Goods store because they were going through all these slips to see where Lee Harvey Oswald had ordered the rifle, and they thought it had come from Klein's, and indeed it did. But I was there working for the local station. But at the same time, you got experience working for the network, because they would borrow you from local, and you go out and travel around. So I really got the bug there to travel, and I thought, gee, wouldn't it be great to go overseas? And then I went overseas a bit later.
How exciting, John. How exciting to think about that, whatever that bug was that really got it going, and being in a big city like that, particularly having grown up in eastern Tennessee. You said in Kingsport.
Right, in Kingsport, Tennessee. But when I look back, Greg, since I wanted to be a policeman or a fireman, I wanted to be a reporter.
Right.
And I was a pain in the neck at the radio station and at the newspaper. I used to go down, I was fascinated to see the newspaper print, and then I would go into the editorial section, kind of hang around, what are the stories today, and they kind of look up and want to say, get out of here, kid. You know? And I would go to the radio station and look through the glass and press my face and see them in there reading the news and broadcasting.
Was in Kingsport.
In Kingsport. Yeah, in Kingsport. And I think I just bugged people to death. They finally gave me a job. The first job I was fired from after 2 weeks because my voice hadn't changed. And they had me reading commercials, and I would say, for a rental house, this has a 2.5 baths with a screened-in porch.
Oh,
and with my voice changing, I think the management of the station realized that I couldn't sell that.
They could never rent it.
They would never believe a darn thing I said.
Right. Yeah. That's amazing. You know, as you think back on those experiences, you think of a first job, and even having dreams, as you say, to be a fireman or a policeman, to think about being a reporter, that's probably not one that a lot of kids have, even these days. They can't really fathom that. They don't see the reporter walk in with a uniform on and say, I want to be wear that hat or have a gun on the holster there. What was it about being a reporter that possibly tickled your fancy, other than being in those locations? Was there a reporter that really
curiosity, and I always say that to young people who are thinking about going into journalism, either print or radio and television. If a fire truck can go tearing past your house, and you don't get up and run to the front window to look out, or maybe go down the street to see what the heck is burning, and if you're not curious, I think it's a job for very curious people. It's not a job necessarily for people who want to be terribly popular. I find that the more sometimes I worked on a story and the more involved I became with it, oftentimes people wouldn't like what I uncovered or what I wrote. And so it's not really, and sometimes I took pride from half the audience says, why did you do that? And the other half said, attaboy, congratulations, maybe you're doing something right. Maybe that's not a good judge of it. But I think that the basic quality is someone who's very curious, like you are. You're curious. You're asking me all of these things, and people love to talk about themselves, so I'm happy to answer.
Sure, sure. And it can be difficult at times talking about yourself, albeit highlighting some of the great careers. And, of course, you've covered some of the biggest stories the planet's ever seen. To think about, I think you shared that it was in, I believe, 1980, the hostage situation. Can you share with viewers what that was like as the story was brewing and as
this was the hostage crisis in Iran, and to go back kind of to the start of it, after being overseas for about 7 years, I was leaving Paris, and my boss came over from London. We had a little party at Fouquet's, which is a restaurant on the Champs-Elysees in Paris. And I went to my boss and I said, I can't believe you came over from London for this, because you know what happened today, the storming of the U.S. Embassy in Iran. 400 and some hostages taken or whatever at the beginning, and then it went down to some dozens that were held for 444 days. And so I was left Paris then, and I came to the White House in the midst of all this turmoil with the Carter administration. He had all of these hostages taken, and then after 6 months or so of no progress with the hostage situation, he planned for this strike to go in and rescue the hostages. And that was my break, and I was at the White House then, scared to death. I thought my career either is going to take a nosedive or it's going to go and improve, and because I had to be right, and I was frightened that I had gotten the wrong tip, and that was that there had been an aborted attempt to rescue the hostages, that several American servicemen had died in the desert, and that the whole thing was called off, and none of the hostages were rescued. It was a traumatic night. I remember Jody Powell, the president's press secretary, looking out the window with tears in his eyes, and I think he was crying as much for certainly the loss of life of the Americans who lost their lives that night, because the Carter administration prided itself in not losing any lives in the military and so forth. But I think he was also crying because he saw the end of the Carter presidency. You had double-digit inflation and this and that, and now they tried to get the hostages out and even failed at that. So that was in the spring, and in the fall election, of course, Jimmy Carter was renominated, but then lost in the general election. To
be kind of behind the scenes, to be able to see the White House that people don't see, and of course for you all, I guess it would be difficult to report it. A lot of people would want to know about it, but it would be difficult finding the services to give a behind-the-scenes look at the White House. That must be pretty exciting, being in there and being close to a president or even a press secretary. I mean, that's a pretty big deal.
Sure, I think, and I always felt that, and I really did. And my boss told me, John, anytime you don't think you're kind of privileged to be able to do that, to go in through the White House gates every day, every working day, even though there were long hours. If you don't get a thrill or a tingle out of that, you tell me and I'll take you out.
I'll move you out,
I'll move you out of there. And while it's demanding, covering the White House, I always equated somewhat to being a doctor, in that you're called at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and you never know what it is. And there'll be the White House secretary or operator say, stand on, for either the president would come on to a group of us that were pool reporters, or the press secretary. I remember the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, when the Shah of Iran, the United States had decided to admit him, and that, of course, triggered the later hostage thing and all of that. But you get a briefing at about 2 o'clock in the morning, and you're trying desperately to take notes and find out what's going on and so forth.